Hello everyone. Can you all hear me at the back? Is that all right? Good. Okay, super. Okay, my name is Paul Johnson. This is the talk I'm going to be giving today. Before I start, I would like to say a big thank you to the sponsors, to everyone who's worked on organising the conference. I know it's a lot of work and really do appreciate it. Thank you. This talk I gave about 3 months ago at the Swiss Perl workshop. That's the view we had, which was quite a bit nicer than the view we have here. You should all consider coming to the Swiss Perl workshop next year. Seriously, you should consider it. When I gave the talk 3 months ago, I had, I think, 50 minutes to give it. And today I have 20 minutes. And so I have decided I'm not going to cut out any slides. Instead, we're going to go broad and shallow instead of in depth on things. That's actually going to hopefully work out quite well because Tom just gave his excellent talk and covered many of the points that I'm not going to talk about. So well done to Neil for planning, or whoever else was involved in that as well. Okay, so I better get started. Actually, I did cut out one slide, but then I added this one and spoke for 2 minutes about it. So. Perl's old. It's you can see Perl is almost 30 years old. Who else is less than 30? Not many of us, okay. Perl is also trendy. This is Sawyer. Sawyer is the Perl pumpkin. That means he's the release manager. You can see Sawyer is trendy. By definition, by extension, then Perl is also trendy. That goes without saying. But there's also a number of other reasons why Perl is trendy, and I don't have time to talk about them, but there they all are, or a few of them anyway. So Perl is old and trendy. And because of that, the aspect ratio is a little bit funny here, but I hope it's all right. Because of that, that means there's a lot of Perl code out there in the world doing great things for companies, making money, and it needs to be maintained. But not only does it need to be maintained, it needs to be developed on, because it's good code, or it's maybe not good code, but it's doing good things, and business requirements change and we need more things. And so there could be a whole bunch of problems with a code base that we have, and if you've got an old code base and you don't have 2 or 3 of these problems, then I think you're doing quite well. So maybe there's some low engineering standards, the design or the actual code might not be particularly good, documentation might be obsolete or missing, tests, probably every person who's ever written this code has left their own fingerprint on it, so you can tell who wrote which code without having to do a git blame on it. There might be duplicated code because someone wanted to write a subroutine that was similar to another one, but he couldn't extract it out of the stuff that was all around it, so it was easier just to write it again. The code I'm working on at the moment has 4 template systems, 2 of which are homemade. Maybe you've got your own ORM built in there somewhere. The original developers maybe have gone, or even worse, they might still be there. But we don't want problems, we want solutions. So I'm a special snowflake and I'm going to give you my opinion, and you'll like some and some you won't, and pick and choose what you think is good. Okay, so this is my first point, is standardize. Standardize everything that you possibly can. And second point is to remove special cases, which is a special case of standardizing, I think. And then automate everything. Those are the 3 points. Standardize everything, remove as many special cases as possible, and automate as much as is possible. Why standardize? Well, we're human, most of us, and we have our memory capacity is sort of short-term memory between 5 and 9 things for most of us. And so we really don't want to fill that up with irrelevant junk when we're trying to work. We want to keep focused on what's important. I've got a whole spiel here about interrupting developers, which I don't have time to go into, but the gist of it is interruptions are bad, but we are going to get interrupted, and when you've got interrupted, you really want to get back into the flow as quickly as possible, so you don't want to be filling your mind up again with all these irrelevancies that are there. I don't have time for that. The slides will be around later, so you can look at them later. Tannenbaum had some great quotes, and I like this one. And the point really is, it doesn't matter which template system you use. I mean, it does, but it matters more that you have one instead of four, and that's the important thing. Okay, so here's a concrete point. If you've got an old code base, hopefully it's in a repository of some description. Maybe it's Subversion or something. Maybe you're lucky it's already in Git. But if it's not in Git, put it into Git. And the reason is, well, yeah, people will complain about it. They really will. But just ignore them and carry on. It really needs to be done. And it's because when you have an old code base, you need flexibility. You need to release something based on some old bit of code while you're busy working on new code. And yeah, I mean, Subversion can do it, but Git can do it better, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And make your guidelines and do things nice, but just do it. Jean-Paul Sartre, l'enfer c'est les autres, is what he said. But he was French, so we let him off. But for us, we say hell is other people's code. And everyone wants to work on a greenfield development, but most of us don't get to do that very often. So we have to work with other people's code. And Tom spoke a bit about this, so I'm not going to go into hardly any detail about it. But basically, tool yourself up to be able to do that and configure your environment and make it so that when someone says there's a bug here, you can work out what bit of code it's in and then you know where you should be typing in order to fix it. A core system. This is part of the standardization. So I think it's important to try and get consistency in the code, and but you also don't want boilerplate. And so my suggestion is to have some sort of base module which you can include in every other module that you have, and this base module will set up as much stuff as possible, and you won't have to put that outside. It will just be one line, use blah 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 base or whatever. And in there you'll turn on strict and you'll turn on warnings and whatever features you're using, whatever version of Perl, and you'll make sure that UTF-8 works correctly with however you're doing it. And you'll pull in a bunch of standard CPAN modules that you want to have everywhere. Because if you don't do this, then every time you want to write a max routine, you'll have to scroll up to the top of the file and you'll have to say, was this in list util, or is it list utils, or list more utils, or list every utils, or what is it? And you can't remember, so you end up just writing submax if x is greater than blah, blah, blah. And so just pull in a bunch of CPAN modules that you want to use. Tom wrote a little bit about this, spoke about this as well. Some people don't log. I personally, I can't understand how it is, but I know it's true because I come into code bases where there's no logging. And just make sure that it's easy to log. So I create these little subroutines here, PTPD, for tracing, debugging, info, warning, error, and fatal. And then it's just really easy to log stuff. And when it's easy, you do it, and it's helpful. Objects. Yeah, okay. Moose. My suggestion is just to use Moose. If you write your own object code, then you're only going to do part of what Moose does. Eventually, you're going to need more power than Moose has, and so you may as well just go with Moose to start with. That's my experience anyway. Use roles and not inheritance. It will take you 2 weeks and a few modules to get your head around how to do this correctly, but then you'll be glad that you do it, and it will save you a lot of hassle. Types. Perl's a typeless language, but types are really good for catching things early. So you've got your Moose types, and then when you enter a subroutine, validate the arguments that come in, and you can catch things early, and it will save a lot of grief. Get a standard set of types. There's modules that do that for you. This one I like. A context object. So the code base I'm working on now has got all these things that are passed all the way around, all sorts of things that shouldn't really happen. A mod Perl object gets passed all the way to the lowest routines because it wants to know what the host name is or something. And so create a context object and put all sorts of stuff in it. Make it a singleton-ish if you want, or a proper one, however you want to do it. And put all the contextual information in there, the host name, whatever web parameters are coming in, if it's a job, if it's a cron job, whatever else information you need, environment information. And just that's always available for everything, so you don't have to pass this global information around to different places. And also, it solves a problem. Maybe you want to write a little helper routine somewhere that you're going to call in every single, you're going to put it into your base module and export it everywhere. For example, you want to know what the current time is, so you write a subroutine called now and you export it in your base module. And then you find out that there's 5 other modules which have a subroutine called now and they all get overwritten and it doesn't work. So you can stick it into this context object, and it's a way of namespacing stuff and just cleaning up the namespaces. I kind of like this concept. It works well for me. DB access layer. If you've got an old code base with almost certainly it interacts with a database, almost certainly it does it in different ways in different places, perhaps even different places open their own database handles, so you've got more than one handle open to a database, and some of them talk DBI directly and some of them talk class DBI, and maybe some of them even go DBIX class or who knows what. So yeah, just this is the way I do it, which isn't important. I like using DBIX simple, but that's just personal, because for me class DBIX is too much. When I want to do something complicated, I spend more time working out how to tell DBIX class to do it than just writing the SQL for it. So I don't do that, but other people, that's probably just a failure of mine, but other people really like it, so that's fine. But yeah, put it in there and simplify all the DBI code. There's probably loads of code all over the place calling local time or maybe GM time and time local and adding 1900 or not adding 1 when it should be and all this sort of stuff. So if you create a date time module, a local one, you can put all your date time handling code into it. I like to base on top of not on top of, but do the same sort of thing that datetime Moonpig did, which is to take datetime and get rid of the stuff that's not very nice about it, clean the interface, disallow parts of the API, make it immutable, and now in this code I'm working on, I try and make sure all the date stuff is now going through here to keep everything consistent, so that I don't have to worry whether something's in one time zone and other things in another time zone and I'm trying to compare them or what have you. It simplifies things. How do you return an error? Perhaps you have a subroutine that returns undef, or perhaps it dies, or maybe it returns some status along with the actual value that you're trying to get out of it. There's probably various permutations of this and other options as well. So I like to create an exception object that can be thrown, and then make it so that when something in your code calls die, it goes through this exception object, and you can log things and you can catch everything, and yeah, make things nice. Job systems are useful to do stuff asynchronous, especially if you've got a web application. All of a sudden you're going to come across something that takes half a minute or whatever, and doesn't need to be done right now. So you can create a job system, a queue, and chuck things in there. And yeah, how you do it is not particularly relevant. This is how I've done it, but Minion I think is quite nice nowadays, and there's other job queues and stuff on CPAN. There's probably hard-coded constants all around the code, and there's global variables and stuff. So put it all together in a single config system that can be, so that all these parameters can be tweaked just in one place, and yeah, get fancy with it if you need to, and all sorts of stuff. But just try and not have magic numbers around the code, but at least give them names and stick them in a config file. Even if the magic number still sits there, at least you'll know what it means, and maybe you can put a comment about why even. Yeah, the code's going to need to call out to do things. So and no one is going to do it properly all the time. There's going to be someone's just going to put it into backticks and run the command and doesn't care what happens, and someone's going to use system and not check the return results, and yeah, and something's going to die later and it's not going to be logged. So when you need to communicate, I like to have a module that goes around system. I like to base it on IPC run because that's quite a decent bit of software, I think. You can put error checking on everything, you can log everything, and you can return an object that provides all sorts of information about what happened with the system and how, when it started and when it finished and what the standard out was and all this sort of stuff. And if you make it just as easy to run as calling system, then people will use it. Okay, I don't have time to talk here about how specifics about it, but yeah, get creative in solving problems. Yeah, I don't have time to talk about it. Yes, system Perl. I can't believe I'm still arguing with people about whether or not we should use system Perl or not, but I am. So my recommendation is don't use the system Perl, and then you can yeah, get loads of different advantages. This is one that often works to persuade people that you should not use a system Perl. If you say, yeah, we can build a more recent one and we can make it run faster. Everyone likes things that run fast. Yeah, for me, I had to build mod Perl too as well because the code I'm working on works on mod Perl. Pinto is really good when you need to actually reproduce stuff. Tests. Maybe there's no tests at all, or maybe there's just a few. But whenever you write new code, you can write unit tests for it. I find it really hard to work on a code base where there aren't tests or I don't trust the tests. It takes a lot of brain power to try and work out, if I change this, what could possibly go wrong? And I have to manually think about that, and then I have to go and check it and make sure it doesn't go wrong. A unit test with a decent amount of code coverage takes a lot of that anxiety away. Selenium is good for when you've got a web application that needs to be tested, and it's not written in Plack. Yeah, get some code coverage in place. Put a CI system in place. It's really useful, and it just helps to get the confidence in the code. Use Plack if you can. The code I'm working on at the moment uses CGI and mod Perl, and I'm just trying to move it all to Plack, just to simplify everything and just make things work a lot nicer. And this is another Tannenbaum quote which I really like: the only way to make software secure, reliable and fast is to make it small, fight features. And if you've got an old code base, almost certainly there is code in there that no one cares about anymore, probably don't even know that it's in there, and it does stuff that no one even knows is there. And if you can find that and get rid of it, you can simplify the code and yeah, and make life easier. And that is the goal, to make life easy. And the way to do it, 3 things: standardize, remove special cases, and automate everything that you can. I think I've finished with a minute to spare. Wow, I hadn't expected that. So thank you very much. That means I have 1 minute for questions. Otherwise, I'm going to be around all day to talk about some of these things in detail, and I will put the URL up for the slides if anyone wants to see them. Yes?
Verifying, how do you go about making sure that the new code does what the old code did?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, well the real answer is that you need tests, but that's not always, I mean, that's in the ideal world. Yeah, the other answer is you really need someone who really understands what this software is supposed to do, and can look at and see, this is what it did, and can look and say, okay, it does the same thing or it doesn't do the same thing. Yeah, that's the problem, yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much.